I arranged to meet up with Lupe in the Mercado at the end of my shift. I had offered to help her sort through documents and deliver them to Elizabeth's law firm. She was seated at a small table with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. She smiled as I approached, standing to greet me with timid familiarity. As we sat down, she slung a large woven bag into her lap and pulled out a thick stack of papers loosely gathered in a manila folder. I briefly scanned through them. There were documents from 1981, from 1990, from 1993, 1994, 1997, 2002, 2003, 2005, 2009, 2012, 2015. There were Jose's old ID cards, pay stubs, and W-2s, insurance forms, rental agreements, utility bills, medical records, statements of payment, and credit history. Everything stacked together in no particular order, a bulging dossier on a life lived at the workaday margins of a country now set in motion against him. I left the documents with Lupe and asked her to excuse me for a minute. I walked across the courtyard and knocked on the open door to Diane's office. "Come in," I heard her say. "Lupe's here," I said, "and she's got a lot of documents." "Good," Diane replied. "Actually," I said, "they're kind of a mess. Is there a big table somewhere where we can lay them out and organize things?" "Of course." Diane led me down the hall to a conference room. "It's free until later this afternoon," she told me. "Do you need anything else?" "Maybe some markers and a set of folders," I said. "There's office supplies in the next room," she offered. "Take whatever you need." For the next 2 hours, Lupe and I stood at the conference table sorting through piles of papers, some of them faded and yellowing. Documents providing evidence of Jose's entry into the United States at age 11 and the work he had been engaged in every year thereafter, earning minimum wage as a dishwasher, a busboy, a custodian, an auto repairman, a maintenance man, a farm worker, a fruit picker, an agricultural equipment operator, a carpet mill factory worker, a truck driver, a construction hand. Documents providing certification of his marriage, certification of the birth of each of his 3 sons, certification of his mother's death, documents providing evidence of the growing lives of his children, children who visited the school nurse and the local health clinic, children who received brain scans, behavioral health reports, cognitive speech and language therapy, children who received report cards and teacher notes, children who were being shaped by the twin identities of immigrant and citizen. As Lupe and I sorted through the documents, I labeled distinct folders and placed each document in its corresponding place. Work, I scrawled on one folder. Residence, on another. I labeled one folder Dependents, and placed a folder for each child inside it. And within each of these separate folders labeled school, medical, and proof of citizenship. I saw ID photos of Jose as a young man with feathered black hair, his skin dark and glaring with the light from the flashbulb. I saw ID photos of his sons, their faces round with baby fat, and I saw the prints of their newborn hands and feet inked on the hospital documents that certified their birth. I saw his and Lupe's signatures over and over again, printed simply in block letters on form after form, year after year. When we finally finished, I walked with Lupe back across the courtyard. As we said our goodbyes, a woman named Anna, a worker at the Mexican bakery, stepped into the courtyard to greet Lupe. She asked about Jose, about the boys, about the stack of documents in my hands. "They're for Jose's case, Lupe said. "He's taking them to the lawyer." Anna smiled at me. "It's so nice of you to help the family," she said. She touched me on the shoulder and looked at Lupe, lowering her voice. "It's hard to imagine that he was La Migra, isn't it?" "Oh, really?" Lupe asked, her eyes widening in surprise. "Jose didn't tell you?" "No," she said, elongating the word. "That's right," continued Anna. "He saw what we go through at the border, and look, now he's helping." I smiled and nodded, wondering if that's what this really was, if I was merely being driven to make good for the lives I had sent back across the line. If I was seeking to dole out some paltry reparation, if I was seeking redemption, I wondered, what would redemption look like? Lupe came to the door after my first knock. "Good morning," she smiled. "It's not so early this time," she said. She disappeared into the house, and I could hear her calling after Diego. She came back to the door with papers in her hand. "Disculpa," she said, "but would you mind if Jose Jr. came too? Last time he was so sad not to go." "Como no?" I said. I gestured at the documents in her hand. "Are those his papers?" "Yes," she said, handing them over. Diego walked up behind his mother and stood beside her in the doorway. "You're almost as tall as your mom," I said. He stood up straight and smiled. "Actually," he said, "I'm taller." His mother swiped at him playfully. "I'm almost as tall as my dad," he said proudly. As we drove north toward the detention center, Diego looked at his phone, and Jose Jr. played a game of soccer on an iPad Touch in the back seat, pumping his hand in the air each time he scored a goal, and then passing the device up to his brother, insisting he watch each computer-generated replay. After about 10 minutes, Diego became bored with his phone and turned around in his seat. "Let me play," he said to Jose Jr. "But you have your phone," his brother whined. "I know," Diego replied, "but it doesn't have soccer." Jose Jr. surrendered the iPod and looked around the inside of the vehicle. "I hope we get back before school's out," he said. I turned and looked at him. He was clutching the shoulder strap of his seatbelt. "Why?" "I thought most kids love to skip school." "Not me," he said. "I like school. Yesterday my teacher said she was going to give us treats at the end of the day today. We even voted on what kind of cupcakes we like." Diego thrust his arm up in the seat next to me. "Goal!" he shouted. He turned to his brother. "Look," Diego said, showing his brother the replay. "I'm going to score a goal just like this on Saturday." After several minutes, Jose Jr. leaned toward Diego from the back seat and touched him on the shoulder. "Look," he said, "it's floating." Diego put down the iPod. "What are you talking about?" "That thing on the side of the road," Jose Jr. said. "If you stare at it, it looks like it's floating." Diego looked out his window at the passing road. "I don't get it," he said. "What do you mean?" "The bar," Jose Jr. said. I turned and looked out the window at the guardrail running along the shoulder of the highway. When I stared at it straight on, the wooden posts holding it up blurred together as they sped past, giving the illusion of a steel barrier hovering above the ground. "You mean the guardrail?" I asked. Jose Jr. smiled at me. "Yeah," he said, "it's floating." At the detention center, I reminded the boys to leave everything in the car. Phones, iPods, wallets, even your belts, I said. We followed another visitor across the lot toward a gate in the towering two-tiered fence topped with coils of concertina wire. After 5 of us had gathered in front of the gate, it slowly wheeled open by remote, and we passed through into the sally port, waited patiently for it to close again behind us. Above me, I heard the call of a mourning dove lilting up from somewhere on the roof of the prison. The wind blew gently against the wires, jostling the arms of a bumpy and bear-skinned cactus beside the walkway. Jose Jr. nudged Diego. "It sounds like our mom is talking to us." I looked at the chain-link fence, trembling with the gust of cool air. "You mean the wind?" I asked him. "Or the birds?" Jose Jr. thought for a second. "All of it," he said. Jose Jr. held his hand up to his face to block the sun and looked toward the door of the prison. I feel like I've been here before, he said to me. "Really?" I asked. "Yeah, like maybe in a dream." He walked to the cactus at the end of the walkway, and I noticed for the first time a slight limp in his gait. He looked up at the fence, and his baggy t-shirt, a hand-me-down from one of his brothers, ripped in the wind. The gate finally closed behind us with a metallic crash, and a guard opened the door to the prison. I watched the 2 women in front of us make their way through the line. Following their example, I took a sheet of paper from a countertop and filled out Jose's name, inmate number, and cell block. When it was my turn at the window, I handed the paper to the guard. He typed at his computer and chewed at a bushy white mustache. "Martinez Cruz?" he finally asked. "Yes, sir," I said. "What's your relation?" "I'm a friend," I replied, "and these are his boys." "Are you their guardian?" "For the day," I said. I handed him a notarized letter from Lupe. Do you have their papers? He asked. Yes, sir, I said, handing him the boys' birth certificates. The man typed some more and then instructed us to empty our pockets and pass through the metal detector into the waiting room. The boys sat next to one another in hard plastic seats. Diego fidgeted with his hands, and Jose Jr. swung his legs back and forth. The two women who came in before us sat across from each other in facing chairs. I like your shoes, one woman said to the other. Are they Vans? Coach, she answered. Oh, the woman looked down at her legs and wiggled her feet. I just got these at Dollar General. That works too, the other woman said. They're kind of cute. After a few more minutes, the woman with Coach shoes asked the other if she had visited the prison before. One other time, the woman answered, on a Sunday. It was busy, she said, shaking her head. I think weekdays are the way to go. I looked back at the boys. Jose Jr. sat holding his face in his hands. To pass the time, I began to walk around the room, gazing at the posters on the wall from the Corrections Corporation of America. Zero tolerance suicide prevention, said one. Be a hero. Keep it a zero. Opportunity is knocking, said another. OCA is currently accepting applications. Another poster depicted a smiling black man. I believe everybody needs a little fun in their life. I am Terry Williams, Jr., a senior corrections officer in Tennessee. I am CCA. Next to it, another showed an older white woman, beaming with pride. My name is Mary Bowermaster. I am a shift supervisor in Florida, and I believe you should never stop learning. I am a CCA. And another. I get to teach people how to live better lives. I am Jason Russell, a nurse, and a woodworker in Mississippi. I am CCA. I stood before the photographed faces and thought about the kinship I shared with them. The badge, the gun, the wrangling of human beings, the slow severing of spirit. In the distance, jangling keys began to echo through the room, and I turned my head to hear the calling of the guards. We were given sheets of paper and instructed to walk back to our cars and drive around the building to another entrance. I'm confused, I said to a guard. I thought this was visitation. This is check-in, the guard said. Visitation is on the other side. Back in the car, I followed the woman with Coach shoes as she drove around the building to make sure I arrived at the right entrance. I ushered the boys out of the car once again and joined the two women in front of another entrance, where we waited for another gate to open. Diego shuffled his feet, and Jose Jr. stood looking again at the top of the fence. I really don't know why I have the feeling I've been here before, he said. He looked down at the guard. I can't handle the pressure. Jose Jr. mumbled to himself. What do you mean? I asked. I don't know if I can handle talking to my dad. I looked at Diego and then back at his brother. Why not? Jose Jr. sighed. Because he's in jail. We were finally let in through the prison doors by the same mustached guard who had taken our documents at check-in. He took the sheets of paper we had been given and instructed us to pass once again through a metal detector. We were led down a hallway and made to wait for several minutes while the guard chatted with a coworker who had just finished his shift. I'll catch you in D Block tomorrow, the guard said. Hell no you won't, his coworker replied. I've got the day off. I'm taking my wife and kids to the ballpark. Well, the guard scoffed, look at you. The guard led us to a doorway and stopped to give us instructions before letting us through. You'll have 45 minutes to visit, he said, and I'll give a 10-minute warning before time is up. You'll be using the phones mounted on the wall next to the window, he continued. Each prisoner has a code to dial out. Wait until the phone rings before you pick it up, or else you won't have a connection. Plastic chairs are stacked against the back wall to the right. Grab one as you enter the room and stack them back where you got them on your way out. As the guard spoke, I noticed that he looked only at the woman and me, that he never lowered his gaze to regard the boys. When he opened the door, I stood behind the boys and ushered them forward. The inside of the visitation room was brightly lit with cinder block walls painted in pale tan. The two women were first through the door and walked directly to the stack of plastic chairs. The guard closed the door behind us and then walked to a desk in the corner of the room and took a seat behind a computer monitor. The boys stood unmoving just a few feet beyond the entrance, staring at their father as he waved from behind a reinforced glass window. He smiled widely at them, standing on his feet, swaying from side to side. I kneeled down to speak to the boys. "Go ahead," I told them. "I'll bring the chairs." When I walked up to the window, Jose Jr. had already taken up the receiver and was speaking with his father. Jose's head and face were shaved, and he looked strong again, like he had regained the weight he'd lost in the desert. Jose Jr. remained standing at the window, even after I placed a chair behind him. He spoke eagerly with his father about school, about his friends at church. He told his father that he missed him, that it was sad at the house without him. Behind us, the guard stood up from his computer and placed something in a microwave on a countertop next to the desk. The beeping of a keyboard rang out through the room, and I watched the man chew at his mustache as he stood waiting for his meal. On either side of me, I observed the women speaking to men clad in orange, their faces held against the glass. "This is love," one woman said into the receiver. "Things are the same out here," the other woman said softly. "Everything is the same." I looked back at Jose and watched the way he tilted his head as he gazed through the glass, the way he smiled as he listened to his son. I watched the motion of his mouth, the way he spoke and laughed. It was like watching a man on mute. I thought, a man who, despite his proximity, would not be heard even if he was crying out on the other side of the glass, even if he was screaming. After 10 minutes or so, Jose Jr. handed the phone to Diego. Jose smiled warmly as his oldest son told him about soccer, about playing with his brothers in the park. His face grew more serious as Diego spoke with him about his grades, about his youngest brother's health, about what he was doing to help Lupe around the house. At times, Jose stared down at the ground, closing his eyes and rubbing his brow. "Mom is working a lot more," Diego told him. "She gets annoyed with us sometimes." "But she's fine," he said. "She's just tired." Diego set the phone down on the ledge beneath the window. "My dad wants to talk to you," he told me. "Oh," I said. "Sure." I stood and grabbed my chair, moving it closer to the window. I picked up the handset. "Paco, Jose," said to me, smiling. His voice sounded tiny and distant in the receiver. I smiled back. "Jose, brother." Oops, sorry. Lupe came by the coffee shop in the morning on her way back from dropping the boys at school and delivered a packet of letters she had collected from family, friends, neighbors, former employers, and fellow church members. I had arranged to deliver them to the law firm as soon as my shift was over. She handed me the envelope and smiled timidly. I noticed a tinge of apprehension in her gaze, as if she was trying to comprehend the image of me as a lawman, trying to discern in me an old shadow of darkness. "It's been so good of you to help us," she said. I shook my head. "It's nothing. Jose is a friend." I looked away. Lupe glanced toward the door. "I've got to get ready for work," she told me. "I'm picking up shift at the restaurant where Jose used to work." "Qué bien," I said. "Estamos en contacto." She waved goodbye and walked across the courtyard to her car. At the end of my shift, I drove to Elizabeth's office and sat with my engine running in the parking lot. I opened the envelope that contained Jose's letters and began to flip through them. Some were typed, but most were handwritten, many of them in Spanish. They all began with some variation of "to whom it may concern." They referred to Jose as a brother in Christ, a family man, a good father, a responsible husband, a reliable person, always working hard, always giving his best, always offering to help with a smile on his face, always laughing. "To whom this may concern," began one letter, "my name is Brenda Collar. I have lived in the United States of America for over 25 years and am now a proud U.S. citizen. I have known my fellow friend and brother Jose for over 3 years approximately. We congregate at the same church, and we both serve in the ushers department. Jose Martinez has always been such a joy to be around. He is a responsible and caring father, which is projected from his 3 young sons. Jose Martinez is a hard-working man who has never left a task uncompleted. It would be a mistake to let such a hard worker, responsible father, and awesome friend go. Please consider my testimony, and if there are further questions, feel free to contact me. Another man from Jose's church wrote, Jose is a good father, a good husband, and a good employee. He is a good example of a good citizen. He always helps people instead of looking for help. Many friends and family members made an effort to write their letters in a way that echoed the language of official documents. I, Leticia Martinez, declare under penalty of perjury that the following statement is true and correct to the best of my knowledge and recollection. To whom it may concern, I am Leticia Martinez. I am Jose's niece. He has been living in this country for many years. He is a very nice person. He does not drink or smoke or use any drugs. He is a very nice person. He is a very responsible and hardworking person. I wish that he had a chance to let him stay with his children in this country. Thanks for taking the time to read this letter. To whom it may concern, wrote another man, in the matter of allowing Jose Martinez to stay in the United States of America, I, Pablo G. Martinez, believe Jose M. should be allowed to stay in the country for the following reasons. He is a hard-working man that holds down 2 jobs. He is the head of a household. Without him, his family would struggle very much, both financially and emotionally. He has 3 little boys who need their father in their lives. He is one of the most respectable people I know, and should definitely be allowed to stay in this great country. Lupe wrote in Spanish on lined school paper borrowed from her children. I, Lupe Balderas, declare that Jose Martinez Cruz is my husband since the year 1999. We have 3 boys aged 15, 10, and 8. We were always a very exemplary family. We would go out when my husband was off work. He was the only one who worked. He had 2 jobs, and his free time was dedicated to us. My husband is an exemplary father and a caring spouse. He doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't use drugs. He only dedicates himself to making his family happy. But now we miss him very much because I, Lupe, cannot take my boys to the park because lately I have been unwell. My husband took my boys to play soccer every Wednesday, and on weekends he dedicated his time to us to eat and go out, and now we miss him. My husband has given 16 years of happiness and love to my sons and me, but we won't return to Mexico because my boys don't know anyone there and they speak very little Spanish, and it's very difficult to adapt to another country when their whole life has been here. They were born here and they are growing here. For us as parents, we want the best for our sons, Diego, Jose Jr., and Vicente. We miss my husband because he was responsible at home. I am his wife, and I love him very much, and I miss him. Diego, Jose Jr., and Vicente miss him. We love you very much. We give hope to God that very soon we will be together because God does not like to see his children separated. Vicente Martinez, Jose's youngest boy, wrote his own name at the top of a letter scrawled in pencil on ruled school paper. There were no spaces between his words, and his writing was riddled with misspellings and backward letters. Hi, Daddy. I love you because you take us to the park and to play soccer. I miss you because you take us to the stores and you take us to go to work and to get money to feed us. The final 2 lines of Vicente's letter were incomprehensible, a jumble of letters that sometimes approximated words and sounds in Spanish. The Spanish words for God, Dios, could be discerned, and perhaps the word for church, iglesia. I miss you very much, Vicente wrote clearly at the end. Te extraño mucho. Jose Jr. had written on 2 half sheets of paper. On one of them he wrote a brief letter addressed to his father, much like that of his younger brother. At the bottom of the message he taped a wallet-sized picture of himself with tattered edges. On the second sheet of paper, Jose Jr. drew his family on a soccer field with frowning faces. The stick figures labeled Mom, Brother, Big Brother. Below it was another drawing, almost identical, except this time the stick figures had smiles on their faces and an extra figure drawn next to them labeled Dad. Diego wrote a letter that continued across several sheets of paper. At 2.5 pages it was the longest of any in the packet. In its opening paragraphs, Diego seemed to realize that his father would likely not see or read his words, and he did his best to maintain a formal tone. Dear to whom it may concern, the letter began, Hi, I'm Diego Martinez. I'm the son of Jose Martinez. I'm his oldest son. I am 15 years old. I have 2 younger brothers. One is 10 and the other is 8. I'm working to keep my brothers happy, to buy them what they want to keep them happy. Well, my well, my dad Jose is the nicest guy. I know my dad is like my best friend and my father. I treat my dad with so much respect. He's the father any kid would want to have. My mom and my whole family broke down when we saw him in court. On the first court he had, everyone started crying. And the second court, when his friend to work took me and my brothers. I broke down so much when I heard his voice, it got me into so much tears. I miss my dad. He knew how to cheer us up when we were down. He took us to the park on Monday and Wednesday to play soccer with our church friend. He got along with everyone at church. My dad was the coolest person, most nicest, most religious, most caring person, always made my mom happy, always putting a smile in our faces every single day. He's also very smart and very funny. My dad always has a smile on his face, trying to always help people who are in need. How I feel right now about my dad being in jail and seeing him like this makes me really sad, depressed. My father isn't here with us. Everyone that asks me about my dad makes me sad to say he's in jail. My heart kind of stops, pauses, and breaks down on every letter they send him. He was a man with 3 children and 1 woman. Each one of my friends I've had for many years loved my dad because he took us to places like to any place appropriate, to mountains in the west, to parks, to many places in the city. My dad did anything to make us happy. Now my life is depressing, hollow. My dad's not here. Missing place for him here waits. My dad's a very responsible man. When I was little, my dad was always by my side and always will still be by my side. I pray to God that my dad is always okay. I miss my dad so much, it's really hard to express and write. I miss you so much, Dad. You always told us to never look back and always look forward. Thanks for always being there for us and never letting us go, Dad. We miss you so much. Just remember, God is always by our side, never letting us go. We all want them to set you free here. Everyone at church and his 2 works misses him a lot. Everyone misses my dad. Nobody wants him to get sent back to Mexico. Everyone's praying for you to let you out safely. And still the same, Jose, we know. Dad, we have a tournament for soccer for church on the 26th of this month. I'll be making goals for you. The goals will be for you. You taught me how to play soccer and told me never to give up, Dad. I'm going to win that trophy for us. I'm training with everything I got to get better each day. Thank you to whoever got the time to read this. I'm sorry it's so long. It's because I really love my dad. We all do, and we're all sad to know he's in jail. Sincerely, his oldest son, Diego Martinez. As I drove... Oh, sorry. That's